Okay, there we go.
Great.
We are recording all.
Thank you. Give me a thumbs up if everybody can hear me okay. Great, thank you. So welcome. I'm so honored that you've chosen to spend some time with me. My name is Mary Gilden, and I am a licensed professional counselor. I've been in this field for about 15 years, specializing in early childhood mental health. I spend most of my time visiting early child care centers and helping teachers with everything from classroom management to difficult behaviors, i.e. biting. I have a small private practice working primarily with children and their families. So our agenda today is we're going to set the stage for 301. Because it's 301, I'm assuming that we have some basic knowledge that we will quickly review. We're going to talk about the impact of stress and trauma on the workforce, caregiver protective factors and resilience, strategies to strengthen our wellness and well-being, trauma supports for families, and how we use community-based supports to kind of buffer that for us. For our learning objectives, we want to discuss infant and toddler workforce wellness and strategies for building caregiver well-being and resilience. So we want the caregivers, us in this population of work, to want to stay in this work and enjoy and be getting something out of it. We're going to identify trauma responsive strategies and how to build partnerships with families and explore the community. So we're it's three parts. It's ourselves as providers, the families, and then the community organizations that can help us. So this disclaimer, and it usually has a really pretty reflective picture here of a tree and a lake, and you can feel really relaxed looking at it. But the disclaimer is that talking about trauma can be really difficult and can cause stress. And stories of real children and their traumatic experience may be shared. And it may be difficult to hear these stories. I'm not going to share any of my horrendous traumatic stories because I don't want to intentionally scare you and send you into fight or flight. But if you feel like it's important for you to be able to share it and have us validate and hear you, then I encourage you to do so. But I trust that you know what's going to be right for you. So if you start feeling stressed, where your palms are sweating, or you're having difficulty breathing, or feeling a pit in your stomach, I want you to focus on your breathing or use another grounding technique. You can always turn off your video and take a few steps around, whatever it is you need for yourself. Okay. So before we jump in, we want to make sure you have some basic understanding of these concepts. So the single most protective factor among children who are resilient despite early adversity is the presence of at least one supportive, responsive adult. So that's it. So that's incredible because it's one adult up against traumatic, horrific experiences. And it's also amazing because that can be you. You have the power just in your presence to be that one adult who is supportive and responsive. Trauma is an experience in which factors overwhelm the baby's, toddler's capacity to regulate emotions. While adverse childhood experiences, or what we know of our ACEs, are common, the factors that protect and promote resilience are ordinary. Traumatic experiences affect the family and broader caregiving system, and that includes you. Fostering responsive, nurturing relationships between adults and children is an essential trauma responsive care. Caregivers can create trauma responsive environments and safe places by ensuring children's sensory loads are minimal. I want to read that one more time. I would go into a center sometimes, and the issue was none of the kids would go to sleep at nap time. And they were listening to gangster rap and oftentimes had the lights on. And it was a very simple intervention, right? Like the kids, they were digging it. They were bobbing their heads and wanting to do the little toddler dance, but it was way too much of an overload for them to be able to rest their bodies and go to sleep. So caregivers can create trauma responsive environments and safe places by ensuring children's sensory loads are minimal. Fostering emotional literacy, which is teaching children about basic feelings and what feeling words are and how to communicate those feelings, are essential trauma responsive practices. Routines and schedules, music and art can all be tools to promote healing. So relationships are key. It is the ongoing daily interactions with loving, emotionally responsive, caring adults, whether it's a teacher, a caregiver, an aunt, a grandfather, a sports coach, that bring about healing. Okay. So looking at every aspect of an organization's programming, environment, language, and values, involving all staff in better serving children who have experienced trauma. This is the definition of trauma responsive care. So oftentimes I say to parents in my private practice that I am not a child therapist, that I am a relationship therapist. If the caregiver's responses to the challenging behaviors don't change, then the difficult behaviors that they're seeing also will not change. So what we're beginning to touch on is relationship, but how we use the relationship to help with co-regulation and healing. And I didn't say it when we started, but if you guys have questions, I encourage you to interrupt. If there is something that is unclear or you want to know more about, I know that you have a lot of experience and expertise in this field, and you've heard a lot of this before. And so if you're wanting to dig deeper and have further questions, I'm fine with this. I want to make sure you're getting out what you need to get out. So the difference with trauma responsive care is having this deep intention. So it's the difference between telling a child to take a deep breath and actually getting on the child's level and breathing with them. Okay. So take a few moments to reflect and just jot down what your favorite thing about being a caregiver is, about working with children is. It could be something really specific, like how cute their little piggy toes are. Or it can be something more general, such as you love watching them learn new skills. And I would love if you could enter it into the chat so that we can see some of your ideas. So my favorite thing about going into a classroom, a setting, and seeing children is their eagerness for relationships. So when I go into a classroom, one of my tools I use is to pretend I'm ordering coffee in a really silly voice. And I go into the classroom and I say, oh my gosh, Miss Mary needs her coffee. Don't forget the cream and sugar. And I have kids from 2.5 to 5, all go in different directions and all bring me different interpretations of coffee. It can be a piece of Play-Doh, a block, a sand toy, but they are ready to jump in to a relationship. And it's astounding how close and how eager they are to connect. Okay. Their warm responses when they hear me say their name, just being heard, yes. Let's see what other ones they have. The sparkle in their eyes when they're given a hug, and their interpretation of their world. Love to dance, smiles, cooing, and gentleness, yes. So it's all about the relationship. Did I miss any? How they engage with those who are in their world. Oh, it's so beautiful. Their cuddles and excitement, their natural curiosity. Beautiful. Okay, great. So now we're going to move on to the harder stuff. The impact of stress and trauma on the workforce. Six million children younger than age 3 are in non-parental care. Many family child care providers and infant toddler teachers experience low wages and economic insecurity, which can lead to stress. The infant toddler workforce experiences high levels of burnout and turnover, nearly 30%. Now, I know that I am preaching to the choir here, that this job, that being a early childhood caregiver is extremely stressful just for day-to-day life. But we're not even addressing doing this work and being present and intentional in this field during a pandemic. So I have just some examples of what is asked of you, and to be present, to be faced with some really, really challenging behavior. I have a director level person in the community at a private childcare center. So one of the highest paid childcare centers, who is living in her car because she is not able to afford rent in our community right now. We have many centers who have closed down, many teachers who are experiencing their own trauma and difficulty. And we're asking them to be intentional and to be faced with this difficulty with low pay and low financial incentives. Okay. So now I want you to take a moment and think about what's the most challenging. It would be wonderful if you felt comfortable sharing, because I think it helps us to recognize we're not alone in this, that we're all facing some of the same challenges. Parental buy-in, not being able to fix some of the problems. Yes. Ratios, low pay, high turnover, etc. Absolutely. Physical and emotional demands.
And Mary, for me, it sets a little bit, we continue to talk about this dilemma, this whatever we want to call it. I just wonder when we're going to be able to do something. We see all kinds of legislation coming down. I'm not really for sure that they're coming down and addressing what maybe some of the real issues are. So I appreciate all that we have the conversations about, but I just wonder, when are we going to get to a space that says, okay, we can help? So just some thoughts.
Absolutely. I think that is what is the most frustrating part, is that none of this is new. I've talked about low wages for early childhood educators for the last 15 years. And it seems like it becomes more and more stressful. And I don't know if it has to get, like, how bad does it have to get until we start seeing real changes? And how am I going to take care of myself and the people I work with so that I'm not another person leaving the field because it becomes too much? Compensation for workforce and to assist with overhead, being able to make sure each child gets the care they need, getting legislature to recognize the importance, yes, navigating through day to day and the mini backpacks. When children grow and have to go, right? And it's so hard to even attend to that, because on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's not something that we're even able to really give attention to, because we're so busy worrying about the backpacks, ratios, feeding. We ourselves are in fight or flight. So being able to process some of those deeper emotions is really hard. So the research is clear. Quality of care and education matters to the lives of young children, and teachers and caregivers are central to providing that quality. So you guys are what makes the difference. And it's not the fancy organic blocks that you have in the classroom or the selection of toys. It's how you show up authentically in the classroom, in the presence of children, day after day after day. So we're going to talk about burnout, vicarious trauma, secondary traumatic stress, and vicarious stress, and compassion fatigue. We don't need to know each one specifically. We're going to define each one, but you don't need to know the difference of every single aspect, because the solution to all of these is very similar. What I want you to do as we go through these, though, is I want you to ask yourself, number one, if any of them sound familiar, and number two, what action steps you're going to take to help resolve them today, starting now. I'd like at the end of this, as you're going into lunch, to have some things that you're going to do to address these. Okay. Job burnout is defined as a special type of work-related stress, a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. Signs of burnout include feeling as if nothing you can do will help, tired, exhausted, and overwhelmed, like a failure, cynical, frustrated, as though you're not doing your job well, disconnected from others, depressed, as if you need to use alcohol or other mind-altering substances to cope. So signs for myself that I'm feeling burnt out is when I begin to get really cynical. I start to think questions like, nothing's going to change. Why am I doing this in the first place? I also begin questioning my career, and the record just doesn't stop. And I say things like, oh, I should have been a banker, or I should have been a gardener, or, you know, this was really ridiculous. What did I think? Over and over and over again. Those are signs that I'm already in the burnout. Yes, or being emotionally removed from the work. So feeling like some of that cynicism comes up for me, where I will hear something and I'll think, it's just the way it is, you know, another child dealing with domestic violence, nothing we can do about it. So assess your options, develop a support network, and take care of you. So burnout is kind of the beginning, and it goes across all different careers and different kinds of jobs. I feel like right now, pretty much everyone I'm encountering in my professional life is in a state of burnout. Secondary traumatic stress is similar to PTSD. It's the emotional that results when an individual hears about the firsthand trauma experiences of another, and its symptoms mimic those of post-traumatic stress disorder. So I have experienced second traumatic stress in my career probably 4 times, and I know that I'm feeling it when I hear about something horrible and I begin to feel physically sick or dizzy. We've all heard of fight, flight, and freeze. I've recently heard of one that's faint, similar to a possum, and that is mine. And so I will be driving home and have to pull over and take a nap. I will fall asleep. And I've realized that that is my way of coping when I hear something really traumatic, and it's actually, I'm kind of taking it on.
زعل يمكن تتكلم يا سلمى معلش بعدين ولا صعبة؟
I have to unmute.
Signs of secondary traumatic stress: easily jumpy, wary of every situation, expecting a traumatic outcome. Physical signs like racing heart, sense of being haunted by the troubles, the feeling that the other person's trauma is your own. And Christina, you mentioned mirror neurons, and I'm not sure if you have a question about that, but the science is proving more and more that our thoughts and our states of being are contagious. Our moods are contagious. Our affect is contagious. And so when you are in the presence of somebody who is experiencing PTSD or experiencing something traumatic, our neurons begin to come together, right? So either I can be a strong enough co-regulating factor to calm their neurons down, but if I'm not, then I'm going to be taking on theirs. Does that make sense? Any other questions about that? Okay, it can be kind of a confusing topic at times. Ooh, this is hard to read. So these are all pretty obvious, but quick tips for combating secondary traumatic stress or trauma is adequate rest, setting boundaries, connecting and seeing friends, and taking breaks from work. So an example is recently I was triggered by something and kind of, I don't know, off my game, I would say. I was triggered, I was upset, I was kind of off my game. And I decided in a moment of wisdom that that would be a really good time to work on a PowerPoint that I was feeling really frustrated with. And so I was already annoyed and already having some pretty mean thoughts about myself go in my head, you know, like, I'm stupid, I'm not effective, I can't do this, da 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 da. That is not the time to engage in something challenging for you. And so part of the self-care and placing boundaries is really understanding that and being insightful of that. So if you are saying mean things to yourself and you engage in activity to combat it or distract yourself, maybe I'm going to go to the gym and run because that's good self-care, right? Everyone says that's what to do. But if I'm on the treadmill talking about what a slowpoke I am, then that's not a good activity for me to be doing. I need to scale it back way more so that I can find kindness and compassion. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, you can go ahead and switch the slide. Vicarious trauma is the emotional impact that professionals feel from hearing about or witnessing the pain, fear, and terror that trauma survivors have endured. And this term shouldn't be confused with burnout because burnout is kind of the milder, ongoing, consistent over and over again, whereas this has a little bit more punch to it. Vicarious trauma signs and symptoms: difficulty falling asleep, worried about not doing enough, dreaming about a child's traumatic experience, intrusive thoughts about a child's severe trauma histories. There was children that I worked with that were homeless, and it was winter when this was when I found out about this. And the vicarious trauma signs came for me because I would wake up in the night and check the temperature outside. And I would think, oh, are they warm enough? Are they okay? Was there room in the shelter? What can I do for them? And feeling like there was nothing within my professional boundaries that I could do. And feeling kind of that deep sense of sadness and not being able to leave it at work, which was different than the secondary PTSD, because that I just pass out. Okay, you can change the slide. So if you or a coworker are experiencing reactions to vicarious trauma, reach out and talk to somebody, establish a consistent work to home connection, tend to the basics, lean into connections, and talk to those who support you in your role. Establishing a consistent work to home transition is a really powerful way to reset your nervous system. And I think that doing this regularly before you experience any kind of burnout or stress is really important. So if you remember Mr. Rogers putting on his like house shoes and house coat when he comes home, and then putting on his work shoes and work coat, it gives us a very clear sense of boundaries, of what hat you're wearing. And it gives others around us a clear sense of boundaries. So when I get home from work, I immediately change my clothes, and then my kids know they can come up to me, they can grab me, I'm ready, I'm present, I'm there for them. Okay. Compassion fatigue is a state experienced by those helping people or animals in distress, and it can create stress for the helper. It's very broadly defined, but it can include emotional, physical, and spiritual distress. A lot of these more intense symptoms of stress do cause me to have a little bit of an existential crisis of, how questioning my spiritual beliefs. How is it possible that a God could let these little kids be homeless? Or how is it possible that the adults in this community can let these kids be homeless? And that can kind of shake you, and having to go back in terms of what are your basic beliefs and where is it that you are getting your hope from. Signs of compassion fatigue: abusing alcohol or drugs and food, anger, blaming, depression, inability to maintain balance of empathy and objectivity, hopelessness, exhaustion, diminished sense of personal accomplishment. So when I have the feelings of, when I think about the homeless children and I'm kind of losing myself a little bit, I no longer have that balance between empathy and objectivity. All of a sudden, I'm just completely overwhelmed with the sad story and the fact that there's nothing I can do to solve it. So a path from compassion fatigue to wellness self-care. And I like to think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. So you first want to start with the nutritious food, the water, the sleep, the exercise. And then you can go into taking on a new sport or reading a book or doing something that takes a little bit more energy, more of your reserves. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this slide because we have not as much time. So Circle of Security is just a phenomenal curriculum and theory with early childhood. And the idea is that kids go out to explore their world and they need a safe place to come back, a safe container to come back. Now, if I am not getting any sleep because I'm thinking about the homeless children, then I'm no longer a safe container for the other kids in my life. If I am not eating well, then I start having headaches and I'm no longer a safe base because I need to be able to be accepting of whatever they bring back to me, whether it's falling down and hurting themselves or emotional dysregulation. I encourage you to look into Circle of Security. It's wonderful. So how full is your pitcher? So if I am telling you that we heal children through our relationship with them and with intentional responses to them, then you're going to need brain power and patience. And that brain power and patience is going to have to come from having your own needs met. So if my daughter asks me a million times to watch her do something, and I don't want to snap at her, then I need to make sure I don't have a headache. And if I'm someone who gets frequent headaches, I'm going to have to make sure I'm drinking water and I'm eating protein and I'm getting sleep. So obviously there's going to be times when I mess up, right? And I don't do this, and then I snap at her. But what I want to be clear here, and what I really want you to take away, is how much work and forethought it takes to be intentional. That I'm going to have to think about this way before I pick my daughter up from school. So protective factors I think about as the armor that I put on, the elbow and shoulder pads and the helmet and like the body armor that I put on before. It's a very silly image because it's before I go into an infant, toddler, or preschool classroom. So there is hope and good news for our resilience. The work that you do is so valuable, and you are doing nothing short of building brain architecture while trying to manage air traffic control. Your care for babies and toddlers create a foundation for their development across all aspects of their life, from their physical health to language development and emotional and behavioral health and wellness. You don't need anyone to tell you the demands are great. And to give yourself in a way that meets the great needs of babies and toddlers and their families, you need great support and optimal help. So let's look at a couple ways that we can do that with self-care. So relationships, having relationships that you can lean on and have a supportive connection with is part of that padding that I put on. The beliefs I have about myself. So again, when I'm feeling triggered or upset, that's not a good time for me. But having the thoughts about myself that I am effective, that I do know what I'm doing, that I can do this, I can make a difference, that's more of that protective padding. Having initiative and self-control. Okay. .34, keep going. So I want you to jot down again what wellness means to you and what contributes to your wellness. And then we'll have a slide of lots of different types of wellness. And if anyone wants to put it in our chat. And Eva, do we need to be done now?
You can wrap up now, or you can take a couple more minutes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So go ahead and just put in what wellness means to you. So my barometer of wellness is when I want to get out of bed in the morning. I feel like, okay, I'm doing good. Adequate rest, consistent routine. Great. So on the slide, we have intellectual wellness, emotional, physical, social, financial, environmental, occupational, spiritual. Good. Sense of well-being. And these are some questions that you can ask yourself to kind of assess where you are and what you need. When is the last time you truly recharged? How is your health? Do you feel lit up, like you're thriving? Do you need financial coaching? Do you need a personal trainer for physical coaching? Enjoying little things, not thinking about the field as a whole, getting sunshine. Yes. Okay. So so the next step in this training, and I'm just going to wrap it up, but you'll have copies of the slide, is how to help build families' resilience. And it's the same thing that we were talking about. It's building relationships with families. Building relationship with families by being intentional with how you communicate with families, talking to them about their children's routines at home. And then the next step or part of this is, how do we involve our community to help us? These are great ways of supporting reflection and mindfulness and breathing. And I believe we have links to that. And at lunch, we encourage you to do one thing that supports this, either using a mindfulness app or a guided meditation on YouTube. So knowing your community resources, such as, and if Rachel, you can go to that slide, would be great, is really important in order to, so that it's not on your shoulders. And that entails knowing what the community resources are, knowing the homeless shelters, knowing the Department of Human Services, knowing the child abuse hotline. But I would say taking a step further and knowing, having a contact name really makes all the difference. So if I know that the family center is helping families with food, then I'm not only going to say, oh, go to the family center, they should have something. I'm going to call the family center, see what they have, see the contact name, and then be able to tell the family, Marielle is waiting for your call. So that really ensures that the whole loop, the whole referral loop, is taken care of. Okay, so I know we skipped a lot. I would love to know if you guys have any further last minute questions or anything you feel like you need support on. I can be here for a few minutes and I can certainly find and send resources. Would you go to the last slide, Rachel?
Sure. Yeah, sorry about that. I wasn't sure which slide you were on. And so, yes, we'll make sure that Eva gets these to send these out too.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. So let me know where you want me to stop.
Perfect. I think.
One more back here or?
Yes.
Here. Okay, got it. Thanks.
So one of the big points that I hope you heard is that you must be well to care well. Self-care, reflective practice, and mindfulness are effective strategies to strengthening your health. Community resources can help with that. Again, so it's not all on your shoulders, but you're going to have to do a little bit of legwork beforehand with finding out who the person is, if the number is accurate. Okay, so now for my last question, I'd like you to tell me in the chat, what is one thing that you're going to do starting today to help fill your picture? I'm not seeing anything yet. Talk with your best friend. More self-care. ensure time and sunshine. It is cloudy and rainy here. Talk about the hat I am wearing, enjoy and the beautiful colors. Yes, take time for myself, self-compassion. Anyone want anything specific? Anyone going to do anything specific? Eat something really yummy. Watch a silly TV show that gets you out of your head. Read a book. Setting boundaries. I might say no to a few people today. Journal. Take a few minutes to make a healthier lunch. Great. Stick to a bedtime routine. Yes. Gosh, it's so hard sometimes. So thank you guys so much for choosing to spend some time with me. You can always reach out. I don't know if my email information, I can put it in here. If you have further questions.
Thank you, Mary. And if you wanted to add that into the chat, perfect. And everyone go ahead and take a nice long lunch break and do some self-care, do some mindfulness work, do some reflecting, do some work if you have to. And we'll meet back at 2 o'clock. So I added the links to the chat. I'm going to add Mary's link to her PowerPoint.
Oh, there's one other resource that I want to make sure you guys know about. It's the Devereaux Resilience Survey for Adults, and it is on the link. You should have a link to it in the resource page.
Perfect.
And
Perfect.
that's a good self-assessment to see kind of where you are.
Okay, great. So take some time, do some respect, reflect, relate, write a few notes down, and we will see you all back at 2 o'clock, and it will be the same link, the same main link that we've been using. See you then. Bye, everybody. Have a nice break.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, I sent you the link to the slides, Eva.
Okay.
Yeah, there were a couple slides that had like really dark like font, and I tried to fix it, but it didn't look like it stuck. So
okay.
Anyway, that was maybe just one thing we would change before we send it out, just so that it's viewable.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, I hope that went okay. I felt like it was a little jumpy back and forth, but
No, I think it was fine on the participant side. So
okay. All right, good. And I think, am I recording? I think